Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Lesley Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 33 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Lesley. If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. In today's podcast, I am so happy to welcome the lovely Kate Ibbotson. Kate Ibbotson is the owner of a Tidy Mind based in Leeds in West Yorkshire. Kate has run a professional organising and decluttering business for 5 years and due to her huge success has recently expanded her operations into the West Midlands. Before becoming a professional organiser, Kate studied psychology, worked in the mental health sector and the probation service, all of which contributed in its own way to shaping her knowledge of how a stable and organised home environment contributes to well-being. Now, I met Kate right at the start of her career and had a feeling straight away that she would be a shining star in our industry, which she absolutely is. We worked together on the board of the Association of Professional Organisers and Declutterers for some time, and in amongst the hard works, we always had a laugh. So she was high on our list of guest people that we wanted on our podcast. Ingrid and I knew we wanted her straight away, and we couldn't think of a better person to talk about decluttering kids' toys. What I didn't mention was that as well as setting up her successful business over the past 5 years, Kate did this alongside having her now 6-year-old twins. So I think my calculations mean that they were 1 or between 1 and 2 when you decided to set up your own business, which sounds a little bit crazy to me. But anyway, Henry and Eva are now 6 years old. So my kids, as you know, are 23, 20 and 16. So I am long past toys. And sometimes when my clients ask me to declutter toys, I'm like, okay. I struggle to know my Polly Pockets, my Paw Patrol, my LOL from my Lego. So you are going to help me out. Welcome, Kate.
Hello, Lesley. It's really nice to speak to you.
So we're going to talk very broadly about kids' toys today and about some of the things that the parents out there might be thinking about in terms of what they need to do to get those crazy playrooms, toy cupboards and bedrooms back under control. Yeah.
It can be such an overwhelming area, can't it? You know, it can cause a lot of stress, really, can't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. You know, toys, kids, this is the problem really, because we like kids to play, don't we?
Of course, yeah.
They make a bit of a mess, and so it has to be.
Yeah, and they have to come out. Everything has to come out, and that's fine. But it's just, there also needs to be some order as well.
So the first thing I want to talk about, Kate, if that's all right with you, is some of the psychology behind toys and children and how they relate to toys and how we relate to toys as well psychologically. It was interesting because I was working with a client yesterday and we were talking very much about that children need to know that in order to have new toys, they want new things all the time, and we facilitate that as well throughout the year for the most part. But I was saying to my client yesterday, it's really important then that they realise that in order to bring new things in, something's got to go.
It is, isn't it? And I think that the rule of 1 in, 1 out, it's a basic principle, and children, even very young children, can understand that, can't they? If they want something new, something else might have to go if they're going to have room for everything that they want.
And I think that's it's a useful principle to start, isn't it? For sure. I mean, when you declutter, if you're going from complete overwhelm, then there's going to need to be more than one that goes out. So you're going to need to do a big declutter, but on an ongoing basis, 1 in, 1 out. Yeah. Really, really good principle to have in your home, because the volume of toys can be overwhelming for kids as well.
I think it can, and I think it does overwhelm them, and I think a lot of children, sensory wise, they are overwhelmed, and they don't know how to articulate that, do they? So sometimes it can result in things being kind of thrown around because they actually don't know what to do. Everything's just so overwhelming. It must be hard, being 2, 3, 4 years old anyway, but if you've got all these things around you. And I suppose related as well to the psychology of it, I think very young children are able to understand the concept of things being passed on to those in need as well. So, the donation side, they can understand that, they can practice that. They've got that kindness in their hearts a lot of the time. So I think that's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where great parenting comes in, isn't it? Trying to explain from a really early age what you need to do to maintain control, what you need to, they can't just expect to have and have and have and not give away and things like that. So it's absolutely brilliant. If you can do the one in, one out, and then you can start to think about the charitable giving as well, fantastic.
And I think a little secret weapon that I often have up my sleeve is, well, all children want to get older and grow out of things, don't they? Because they're getting bigger. They say I'm not a baby anymore. So when they outgrow toys, then that's actually something to talk to them about. Is it still appropriate for you? Or is this for a younger child, a baby?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, as parents, we need to teach them. There are so many times when I work with people, and there's very much the idea that, and we've all done it, go upstairs and tidy your room. And these little kids are kind of like, well, I don't know how to do that, because maybe there's not a system in place or something like that, or maybe the rest of the house is a little bit chaotic as well, and so they've not learned effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And they can't necessarily articulate that they don't know how to do it, but they might just feel frustrated. I remember when I used to talk to my kids about making their beds, but it was only when I said to them, can you straighten your duvet and put your pillow at the top of your bed? It was only then that they started making their beds. They didn't know what I meant by make your bed.
Exactly. And it's interesting, even when we work with adults, a lot of times adults that are out of control with clutter in the house say, my mum or my dad never taught me this as a child, and so I just don't know how to do that. And children are the same. So the earlier you can start with that kind of behaviour, teaching them, the better, really, because you should model the behaviour, the adults should model the behaviour to the children, shouldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. So I think children mimic what we do. That's what they do. They're watching us all the time, aren't they? So for us to do it ourselves and to keep our homes in order, or at least, attempt to, it's not about perfection, is it? But just keeping our homes in order, but also being positive about that. So not treating it as a chore and acting like it makes us happy and content to keep our homes in order. That's going to filtrate down to the children, and they're going to want to do that for their own spaces as well.
I love this idea, Kate, with your 6-year-old twins, of having this beautiful, this is not a chore. So that's what I've got in my mind at the moment. But anyway, right.
Well, I just want to add that sometimes things are a complete mess at my home as well. The only difference is I know we can get it sorted, in not
Absolutely.
too long.
I think the important thing for me has always been, of course, we love our kids to play. We want them to play. We want them to be happy. And in order to do that, for the most part, they're going to make a mess. And no more so than when they're crafting. That sometimes almost tipped me over the edge as a long time ago. But it's like, oh, look at all that glitter and sequins. But it's important that they're allowed to do that. But it's also important that they know that can't just get left all over the dining table and stop us having dinner at night and things like that. So I think it's important to allow them to express themselves creatively, but as you say, also important for them to have that order at the end of the day.
Exactly. And they don't always have to be able to have everything in reach, especially for young children. The craft or the jigsaws with loads of pieces, or just things with lots of pieces in, they can be supervised activities, so you as the parent can have a bit of control over when that's coming out.
Definitely. Now that takes us very neatly on to talking about the location of where toys and books and kids' things should be stored in the home. So I wanted to talk a little bit about playrooms, because as a parent, as a new parent, then I think I'd love to have a playroom for my children. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think the dream is you'd have this playroom and everything would be very contained, and then the rest of the house would be as you'd have it as an adult, maybe. But the reality is not like that, is it? Because children want to play around us, they want to play in different rooms, they want to drag their toys from room to room. That's part of play, isn't it? So in my ideal reality would be, if somebody was lucky enough to have a playroom, it wouldn't just be a playroom, it would be a dual use room. So it would be something else as well. It would have a sofa in it for chatting and chilling out. Or in my playroom at home has 3 uses. It's a playroom, it's my office in the corner of it, and it's also a living area as well.
Right, okay. Yeah, I think quite often, as I say, you know, people do want this playroom and then become disappointed when the kids don't stay in there, but they absolutely, and you want that, you know, you don't want them to play on their own, you know, you want them to be around you. But I think the important thing about a playroom is it does provide a purpose, and it does provide a kind of storage facility for things, so that those toys don't impact permanently on the rest of the house. And so to me, that's the most important thing about a playroom, is that it stores everything and categorizes everything nicely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, you can often build some really nice storage into it. You might also have to have storage in other areas of the house, you know, for toys in their bedrooms, for example, in the living area, and that's fine. But you know, you can conceal that storage quite well these days, so it's not that you feel that everything's overrun with toys once everything's tidied away.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, toys do tend to sort of find different places in different parts of the house. But I think the one thing that definitely is sort of scattered around the house is books. So because books have different purposes, don't they? So books are found in lots of different rooms. So where have you got your books for your children in your house, Kate?
Yeah, so what I have and what I always recommend is a basic organisation principle that you'll be very familiar with, Lesley, which is store it as close to where you use it as possible. So certain books will be stored in the playroom or in the living room, and they're the books that I would read maybe with the children, but they'd be more interactive. They might have noise in them, or, you know, lift the flap up or something like that, or they would read them on their own. And then in the bedroom, I'd store the books that supposed to help them get to sleep. That's the idea, isn't it? You know, the quiet, calm ones. So yeah, and just you know, if you're the sort of family who love reading, then why not have books stored everywhere, because you're going to use them everywhere, aren't you?
Exactly. So yeah, I think there is definitely a sort of delineation, isn't there, between books that you're going to read to your children, which are going to be, you know, they're not going to be able to potentially read themselves, and as you say, the kind of more interactive books and things like that. So there's no problem with having books in lots of different areas.
Well, if you've got homes for them, it's fine, isn't it? You know, you can use the wall to store things high up so they're not on the floor. You can use furniture to store them in, you know, Ottoman furniture and that kind of thing.
Talking about storage then, Kate, I don't know about you, but I'm sure that this is probably the same for you. The main toy storage that I see in people's homes is the classic IKEA Kallax unit and the Trofast unit. So the Kallax unit is the one that's got the kind of squares and the little drawers or baskets or whatever, which I love for all kinds of storage and not just toys, but I think it's particularly good for toys. And then the other one that we see quite a lot, which is more, so the Kallax unit, the interesting thing about the Kallax unit is that's, I don't think, that isn't on display normally in the toy section, in the children's section of IKEA. But the Trofast, which is is that the right name? I think it is.
Trofast, yeah.
The Trofast, which is the one that kind of goes on multi-levels and has different size boxes in different colours. It's a modular system, isn't it, as well? So a lot of people like that Trofast system as well, which are both brilliant systems. Is that something that you see quite a lot in your work?
Yeah, similar really. So like you, I often see the Kallax unit, and I'm always really happy when I see a Kallax unit actually in a client's home, because I know that we can often make improvements to it and it's a really good starting point. So that's really great, and I love it because you can build it upwards, you can build it outwards, and you can adapt it to the space. But Trofast I also think is really good, and again, you can individualize it, can't you? I think the big Trofast containers, you know, the largest ones that they do, are great because you know you're going to be able to fit most toys in there, not all obviously, but then when you get up to the small trays in Trofast, then you're starting to get in the position where you've got overflow, which is never good because that's when things spill out. I mean, I do often find that with toy storage people don't have enough of it. I think it's the one area that a lot of my clients, they don't have enough, and they end up needing to acquire more toy storage.
Definitely. So you always think that you've got enough, but you never have. And I would completely agree with that, Kate, that if you've got a choice, and if you have got quite large volumes of toys, the bigger Trofast storage units. And if you want to see what the Trofast is, and what we'll put some links to that in the show notes, and you can very easily see it if you Google Trofast IKEA and see what
you don't necessarily have to use the actual Trofast unit. I mean, I've got the large Trofast boxes in my daughter's room. I think we've got 6 of them because she keeps all her toys in her room. Just on simple shelving. It's not Trofast, but the actual boxes are great.
Both the Trofast and the Kallax unit have got something in common, which is that they are effectively open boxes. And so what do we think about the difference between, because quite often people will ask us, should I put lids on boxes or should I leave them open? So I know what I think, and what do you think?
Definitely declutter the lid, get rid of it, because children need to have everything in their eye line. So do adults, I think, to a great extent. So I say open containers, possibly transparent containers as well. I mean, IKEA do another one called Samler, just basic Samler boxes. I think they're great too. I think one of the toy boxes has got an insert in it as well that you can pull in and out, so you can keep small toys in the insert, and in the bottom of the Samler box you can keep the bigger toys. Right. So that's good. So open top and transparency if possible.
Because it's all about, and again, this is exactly the same with adults. It's not just for children. But what we're trying to avoid here is we're trying to avoid barriers for people. As soon as something's difficult, people don't do it. And so, you talked about having things close to where you're going to use them, for storing things close to where you're going to use them, which is rule number 1. And then the second thing is don't create any barriers, whether that's in a paperwork system or a toy system or whatever. If something is difficult to achieve, you're going to be less likely to do it. And so I think it's absolutely critical that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for these kids to put things away at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's 8 o'clock at night, everybody's tired, you've got 5 minutes. It is just a case of both the child and the adult. You need to just throw things in. It needs to be easy, and it needs to get in order within 5 or 10 minutes. I think that's the only realistic way that things are going to stay ordered.
It is. So again, that takes us very neatly on, Kate, to categorisation, which I wanted to talk about. Obviously, this is very different, isn't it, depending on the age of the child. But we're pretty much talking about primary school age children here, younger children. We're not talking about teenagers. And so luckily, by the time they get to teenagers, a lot of the toys start to go out. So there is hope, listeners. There is hope that these toys are going to disappear over time. Everyone's like, I was just going to get completely overwhelmed with this toy mountain. It does go down. So categories are going to be different depending on what the child likes, whether a boy or a girl, things like that are going to be very, very different. And so what kind of categories do you tend to see working within your toy declutters and organisations?
So I think, it does depend on the sort of people that I'm working with, and also the amount of toys they've got. But category wise, I would definitely go for quite fat, broad categories. I call them fat categories. So, don't overcomplicate it, because at the end of the day, it's got to be a 5 to 10 minute tidy up at the end of the day. But perhaps I would categorize them into vehicles, dressing up, soft toys, noisy toys, the ones that, that have the tinny sound. Or, maybe even broader, maybe small toys, big toys, soft toys. You could go animals, you could get a little bit, you could categorize a little bit more, but I think I would, tend to go broad.
The kind of figures, quite often you've got all the little figures and big figures can go together quite often, if people are allowed, which sometimes they're not. I don't know whether it's the right thing to say, but you can have kind of weapons and swords and lightsabers and things like that can all go together, can't they? And things like that. But I think you're absolutely right, and I love that term of fat categories, really. So the one thing really with categorization, if you do go really narrow on your categories, I think it's going to be a parent that's going to be doing the tidying rather than the child, isn't it? So these fat categories are really important so that a child can do that themselves and keep it simple.
Yeah, I think realistically, you as a parent will be actually doing the tidying up. You can talk to the child about it, can't you, when you're setting these things up so that they feel involved. I think the more involved the child feels, the more likely they are to take responsibility for their toys. So even to the point where you might call the toys certain things, like my little boy Henry, for example, because I call one of his categories weapons. He's really excited about tidying that particular category up, because he thinks it's cool. But I think as a parent, you just have to be prepared for the fact that the child might find it easier to just throw everything into a very large toy box. You could have one massive toy box per child if you had the room, and tidying up is just a case of putting everything back in it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say, I mean, I pretty much know when I'm doing a playroom with a client that we're going to make this beautifully organised, categorised system, and probably within 24 hours of me leaving, it's going to all be a big jumbled mess. And so it can be quite disheartening sometimes, kind of doing playrooms, but it's good to go through it. And obviously you're going to do categorisation because you need to gather like with like, so you know how much, it's exactly the same as normal decluttering. It's no different to any other type of decluttering, really. Gather like with like, then you can see what you've got, and then you can discard what you don't need.
I definitely draw the line at colour coding Lego though, Lesley, wouldn't you?
I absolutely would. I think you're making a rod for your own back with that. But no, I don't think so. No, maybe when they're 15 and they're still a Lego fan, they can colour code their own Lego. Yeah, that's what I would say anyway. But yeah, it's just about keeping it simple, isn't it? You need to create a system that's going to work for the person that is doing it, and that's not too crazy. So let's not go crazy on the organisation. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, Kate, in terms of, well, it's not really storage, but it's something that we see quite regularly in playrooms, are tables. So these quite often can be just a standard sort of plastic table that they're going to craft on or put something on or play on or whatever. Or quite often it's these big, I don't even know what you'd call them. They have kind of like, not train tracks, but like car tracks and things like that on them,
like inbuilt into it. Yeah.
What do you think about a table in a playroom?
I think as a parent, I think you really have to ask yourself the question, is it worth the space that it's going to take up before accepting it, or before buying it, or before accepting maybe it being donated to you from somebody else? Because it takes a big impact on a room, doesn't it, that sort of sized thing. And tables can attract clutter, they can attract stuff just being piled on them. So I would say just think about what it's going to be used for. So is the table going to be used for a train set, for example? Well, that could work because that's the home for it. Or another large toy that I think some of the board games have got a lot of pieces that you can build up, and in order to use anything you need to have it set up, don't you? There's no point having it away in a box somewhere and not using it. So I would just say think about what the table is going to be used for.
And I think you're absolutely right there, Kate, which is to really think about how much use and benefit you're going to get out of something that tends to be quite large. Is there anywhere else in the house that could be used for that purpose? And as we spoke about right at the beginning, your kids tend to want to play close to where you are. So could they just use the kitchen table or the dining table to do their jigsaws, or their, could you put a kind of wipeable tablecloth over your dining table and they could play there? Because I have to be honest with you, those tables for the most part in most of my clients' houses just become dumping grounds, and they're not used as tables because the kids don't want to play on, they want to go on the dining table or the kitchen table. So really, really think about that. It's the same as having a chair in your bedroom and piling clothes on it. You have to look at your own behaviours, and again, jumping back to what we spoke about before, about adults should model good behaviour. If your dining table is full of clutter, then the chances are that your child's play table will also become full of clutter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, any big item, it's really got to put some thought into it. There was a beautiful rocking horse in a client's home the other week, and it was beautiful, but the child just didn't play with it. And I've seen that a lot, actually. And I think sometimes it's just about thinking, how else could that space be used? Because I think children like space, they like a bit of floor space to jump around and dance around and charge around. It's important.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because we do get caught up, don't we, in a marketing moment, really, with toys. Well, we want to do so much for our children and to give them what they want, but they are marketeers' dreams in the same way that we are, and they want the latest things and things like that, don't they? So we really need to, you're absolutely right. Is it more important for them to have space to dance around, or is it more important for them to have a fancy table with a track on and things when they could actually use their little cars on the floor, But anyway, the same goes for other large toys, I think, kitchens,
Yeah.
workbenches, shops, and they're cute. They're so cute, and you really want your child to have
Yeah.
them. But they
Yeah.
take up a lot of space in the room, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They take up a huge amount of space, and then sometimes the child plays with them, sometimes the child doesn't. Sometimes a sibling will play with something, and then the parent will think that younger siblings are going to play with it, but actually they don't. So I'd always say, really observe what sort of child you have and whether they are getting value out of it. But I've noticed it work quite well if you actually, like these toy kitchens, for example, having that actually in the kitchen. I've seen that work quite well. The child playing in the kitchen while everyone else is in there, and toy hoovers with the actual hoover. So the child might get their toy hoover out when the adult's cleaning and hoovering. And I just think, why not incorporate things into everyday life as much as you can?
I've got this idyllic vision of you, Kate, at your house with your Dyson and your twins with their two hoovers. The last thing that I wanted to talk about actually because we spoke briefly about categorisation, was labelling. What do we think about labelling within kids' toys?
Yeah, I think it's definitely got its place. I think sometimes it's more for the adult than it is for the child, but I think that's okay. And I think you can make the labels look really attractive. My favourite labels are the adhesive chalk labelling ones.
Okay.
So it's kind of chalk paper, so you can use a chalk on the label and it just sticks directly to the box or the shelf or whatever you're labelling, and then obviously you can then rub that out and change it. Things are always going to change, aren't they? They're going to be one label 1 month and then it's going to be something else the next. But I like the way they look, and I think sometimes you've got wicker baskets or wire baskets and you've got those labels that you can tie on, the tag labels. They're quite nice. And sometimes if the child can't read, then you could use pictures instead. So
pictures definitely work, don't they? And they also help in terms of tidy up, because any great organizational system is really a system that can be used by anybody that wants to use it. So if you're lucky, a lot of people might have a cleaner and things like that, and if you want your cleaners to do a bit of tidying up for you and things like that, they can put things away in the right places rather than the wrong places. Or an old enough to get them to help you, which is a bit of a long shot, but
but you're more likely to. It's giving it a home, isn't it? It's giving it a home. And also I've got a big thing about being tired at the end of the day, because I know I am, and I know a lot of mums are and dads. So you don't really want to think, you just want someone to tell you where it's going. When the label can do that, it's right there in front of you.
Definitely. So labelling is definitely a great thing, isn't it? And the systems that we talked about, the Calax unit and the Trofast unit in particular, and anything with baskets definitely lend themselves to labelling, don't they?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we've spoken about the psychology and we've talked about where things should be and various storage ideas. So actually getting children to maintain the sort of toy systems, this is the big question really, is how do they do that? So have you got any bright ideas as a mum of 2 6-year-olds how to teach them and how to incorporate? We're laughing already, aren't we? We're laughing. It's just like, of course they're going
to I'm laughing because what the theory is and what the practice is isn't always the same, is it? And there's loads of things that we all could and maybe should be doing if we want to make our homes ordered. It's not always going to happen. We're not always going to be able to implement those habits. But when I work with families, I like to talk to them about what is happening kind of in a broader sense in terms of the acquisition of things into their home. So I always say that you can't empty the bath if the taps are still running. So by that I mean look at what's coming in and where is it coming from, and just be aware, because I think a lot of the time we're not totally aware of what that is. And conscious consuming is this term that's bandied around a lot, isn't it? But really children can very easily understand the fact that there isn't an infinite number of space in the world. Like there isn't so much space in the world that they can have everything. And they can even understand the fact that not everything can be recycled from a very, very young age. And I would just say look at ways to reward children that don't involve giving them things, especially plastic. and make it the norm that part of a birthday present at least is going to be an experience, like a trip to the cinema or den building or something in the woods. And I think if you plant that seed when they're quite young, then you can gradually increase that as they get older. So that's what I mean by conscious consuming, and also talking to them about passing their toys on to other children who don't have as much as they do. Again, it's a concept that they can understand, and it can make them feel good about themselves. Like doing a good deed and showing kindness, that's going to give them that warm feeling inside. And it's not about expecting things to change straight away. So I think it's just about having these conversations as part of everyday life. You're getting that seed in, and they are going to start thinking about that more as they get older and they start forming their own ideas.
And I think that's absolutely reinforced all the time at schools and nurseries. We see it ourselves, just in the last 18 months or 2 years with the sort of highlight of single-use plastic.
Yeah.
I know it's been around a long time, but it's really, really come into the sort of public domain, hasn't it, the last couple of years? And it's important for us to do that because there are so many reasons why we buy our kids things, and some of them are not great. Some of them because we feel guilty, because we feel that we've not given them enough time, because we're busy at work, and those are all normal human emotions. But it's about, as you said right at the beginning, Kate, they will mimic what we say, and they'll take that on board. And so it's really important to just think and to try and not always buy them something, because it just then leads, it's a kind of self-perpetuating thing, isn't it? They get more and more and more, then they become really overwhelmed, and then there's too much, then you become overwhelmed. And so it's a tough one. We talk about it in half an hour today, but trying to get your kids' toys under control is really hard.
Yeah, exactly. It is difficult, and sometimes the toys or the things are coming in from another relative, maybe like a grandparent, and I think that's difficult, isn't it? Because then you don't want to seem ungrateful, but again, maybe it's about thinking about talking to that relative about experiences that you could have where you're a bit more connected as a family, and it doesn't involve actually buying things.
So
it's a drip approach, isn't it? It's a long-term aim.
Yeah, it is. And it's hard to be focused on everything all at the same time, isn't it? It's a tough job to be a parent, and this is just one part of it. Right. So to answer this to me, Kate, so they go to school at 4 years old, and right from the word go, or even at playgroup, right from the word go, the teacher can say, right, okay, kids, it's tidy up time, and they can all put everything away and everything's perfect. But if we go, okay, kids, it's tidy up time at 7:30 at night, they're like, no, I don't think so. So what's the difference between a teacher and a parent?
I think consistency is probably the difference. It's a mix of the teacher always being consistent and also peer pressure, because everybody's doing the same thing, isn't it? So I think often as parents, and I include myself in this, I'll say one thing one day and I'll say another thing the next day. So obviously they're going to be thinking, she doesn't mean it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting.
Consistent, yeah.
It is, and I think it's also, you're absolutely right. It's a kind of everybody doing things together and peer pressure and things like that. But it's like when we're doing an organising session. So if we're doing a 4 or 5 hour session with a client, we will factor in tidy up time. I'm not so tidy up time, that makes it sound like reception children, but a kind of tidying up and sorting things out at the end of our session. And as professionals, we will do that every time, and so we know that everything is orderly when we leave that client that day. And so I think it's getting to that point. But again, we've got dinner to put on, we've got phone calls, we've got social media, we've got lots of things that are pulling on our time. And it's easy for us to do that, isn't it, when we're working, because we've got very defined things, and we're there and we've got the client's attention for that 4 or 5 hours. And so, but I think it is important within a sort of play session to think in advance, if you can, about how much time it's going to take realistically to get that playroom, living room, bedroom back to some kind of reasonable state at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think they need a bit of warning, so they might need a 5-minute warning that that's going to happen soon. So we're going to tidy up in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. They might need 2 warnings, and they also might need a carrot on a stick, so mine will be able to watch some TV after they've tidied up, or after we've tidied up, because we're a team and we kind of do it together. But that's what's going to happen first.
No, it's really important to get those routines in place and to show that you mean business. And but you know, I'm still sitting here with a 23-year-old, 20-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and
Yeah.
life is not. I still pick up after them, but mine's just like picking up boxer shorts off the bathroom floor and towels that have not. But you know what I mean. So it doesn't really go away. But they do have an understanding, I think, of what tidiness looks like and what organisation looks like. I'm not saying that they always achieve it, but I think they know what that is, and I think that's really critical.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to teach them life skills, aren't we? We're trying to equip them for adult life, and at the end of the day, they will have to learn for themselves when they have their own space, whether that's a student room or whatever, or their own flat. All we can do is sow these seeds in their minds, and then time will tell. You know, they'll hopefully be better equipped than they would be if we hadn't.
Exactly. Just one thing that I wanted to talk about, which again gets bandied around, this is where the kind of magazines and things and social media comes in, with children and parenting and things like that. Quite often we hear about rotation of toys, so rotating them out sort of seasonally or every 6 months. What are your thoughts on rotation of toys, Kate?
Yeah, I think I don't generally recommend it. I recommend being able to have the right amount of stuff for your home at the time. But I think if there already is maybe an excess and you don't want to let it go, then it could work in some circumstances. So you could take the toy away, store it somewhere if you've got the storage room, take it out after a few months and replace it with something else stored away. Now, for my children, they wouldn't have allowed me to take one of their toys away and then return it in a few months. That would have caused a major issue. So I've never done it. And also ask yourself, realistically, are you going to do that? You're creating another task for yourself, having to take it out of storage and replace it. Do you have the sort of lifestyle that's going to lend itself to that, and the sort of personality that's going to do that?
It's a very meticulous person that's going to do that, isn't it, Kate? I mean, I'm a professional organiser and so are you, but I know that I wouldn't have the organisational systems in place in my mind to do that, sadly. Well, we're going to point to people with our lack of proficiency as professional organisers. But no, you're absolutely right. And, you know, you're talking about excess, but I've got to be honest, and this is my own house included, it always looks excessive when you've got children. The amount of toys always looks excessive, doesn't it? Because it's just a crazy amount of things, you know, even just the categories, if you've got jigsaws and board games and books and things and kitchens and craft stuff, even that just in itself, even if you've only got one box of each, it's still a lot of stuff, isn't it? You know, things that tend to be big for children. So it is completely overwhelming. And I would say that for parents of young children, that's probably the most overwhelming thing that most parents have got to deal with, is that kind of kids' toys and where are these going to go. And the modern homes that are not huge and have not got playrooms and have not got basements and huge bespoke toy storage really have to make that work within their own house, but kind of counterbalance that then with kind of trying to keep the kids happy and creative and playful and things like that. So it's a tough one. So talking about parenting then, the last thing that I wanted to talk about really was what we do once the kids have outgrown their toys, but we've got such special memories of those toys that we don't want to let go of. So keeping toys for sentimental reasons.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's often about the adult's decision that something's going to be sentimental. It's not always going to be like that for the child, is it? And I think that's difficult to accept sometimes as an adult, that they're not going to have that sentimentality about it. You know, will a photo suffice? So that's the starting point. You know, can a two-dimensional reproduction be better than keeping the actual thing? So I think that's something to think about. At the end of the day, it's only stuff, isn't it? You know, it's not a person. It doesn't have feelings, and it's valuable at the time, but there's plenty of other memories that can represent that era of time without keeping a large toy.
You're absolutely right, and you can't let that overwhelm you. You know, the memories are still there, aren't they? Your kids, you know that your kids hopefully had happy childhoods and were able to play, and you know, and that's the most important thing to keep, and a kind of Thomas the Tank Engine figure is not going to make that any sort of more prominent of a memory, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of nurseries and schools these days do books, scrapbooks, I guess, where they take photographs of the children, and they take, in nursery, they take photos of the toys that they're playing with, and then obviously as they get to primary school, it's more learning based. But I think it's amazing. I mean, they're doing the hard work for you. They're making this scrapbook that takes up hardly any room of a whole year of your child's life. So you could do the same at home, or you could just use what they do for you, maybe.
Exactly that. Well, we talked about sentimentality with children in last week's podcast, if anyone's not listened to it. And I don't want to end on a low, because is it a low or is it a high, Kate? It's all like,
a mixture of both.
A mixture of both. It always makes me so happy to talk about children, because even though I'm kind of well beyond that, it's just such a special time. And the most important thing is allowing your kids to be creative, to have fun and to play, but making sure that you're not completely overwhelmed and consumed with stuff. They're doing that. So create some routines for yourself and try and keep things under control and organised in your home. I want to say a massive thank you, Kate. That's the end of our lovely podcast on children's toys. And so thank you so much for everything that you have done. And listeners, thanks for taking the time to listen today. If you'd like to get more tips and advice, please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and have a lively, supportive Facebook group community, which is called the Declutter Hub Community. Come and find us. We'd love to see you there. If you don't want to miss the next weekly episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast on iTunes, Spotify and Stitcher, and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. Thanks very much again, Kate. If you want to know more about Kate, tell us your website address.
Yeah, so it's atidymind.co.uk, and I'm on Instagram as atidymind and Facebook as a Tidy Mind HQ. So, and I do a blog most weeks. I do a blog on the website as well, and I'd love to chat with you and hear from you.
Thank you ever so much, Kate. It was an absolute pleasure. And listeners, we will see you all next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration, and don't forget to tune in next week.